I am fortunate enough at the time of me recording this video to be at a little bit over 80,000 subscribers. Now I know what all of you are thinking and typing in the comments as we speak. Sean, you should have over 1 million subscribers. You know what? 10 million subscribers. Bare minimum, 100,000 subscribers. And while I want you to feel those feelings and share my videos and spread the word and get me to over 100,000 subscribers, because I do in fact deserve it, even though I'm incredibly humble and I would never say that, that's not the point of me bringing it up at the start of this video. Because one of the things I've learned building an audience over this time is that there's no room for mistakes on this platform, at least not for me. Anytime I slip up on a statistic or a point or I mess up a reading of the law, somebody will be in the comment section of my video to tell me how wrong I am. In fact, some of you are so goofy about it that even when I'm telling an absolutely obvious joke with amazing sarcasm that you'd have to be an idiot not to pick up, you will be in the comments correcting my mistake. So, considering mistakes are basically out of the question for me, making videos for the size of audience that I do have, the idea or the concept of me coming out here making a video and outright lying to your face about stuff that I'm going to prove to be false during the course of the video is even more off the table. And that's why this video from the Young Turks, who are at about 4.9 million subscribers, lying to your face within 10 seconds of the video is so fascinating to me. Because not only does TYT lie directly to your face, not only do they insult the intelligence of everybody watching this video, but they actually show the clips in question that specifically disprove the lies that they tell in the video. And that's why we're going to go over this, because their level of Trump derangement syndrome and their level of lack of respect for their audience is off the charts. And I just find this amazing, specifically being a content creator with a much smaller audience and not being able to get away with half of the lies that they tell just within the first 10 seconds of their video.
The Proud Boys are celebrating today after Donald Trump refused to condemn them and white supremacy during the first presidential debate.
Anna, I know you don't think your audience is very bright, and honestly, the staff at the Young Turks aren't very bright themselves, but within the first 10 seconds of this video, you are already lying. Donald Trump did not, on the debate stage or at any other point in history of his life, refuse to condemn white supremacists. You are about to show the clip of him saying, in response to the question on whether or not he condemns white supremacists, sure, I'll condemn whoever. But you don't even respect your audience enough to not lie to them and then to not disprove your own lie and pretend like it didn't happen. Absolutely amazing. See for yourself.
What am I referring to? What was the moment in the debate? Well, take a look for yourselves.
Are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups?
Sure.
And
so right there, Trump says sure as soon as the word white supremacist comes out of the mouth of Chris Wallace. Obviously, he's willing to condemn them. He's done it multiple times. And just in case you weren't buying into that, later on at the end of Chris Wallace's question, he says, sure, I'm willing to do that.
to say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland.
Sure,
Are you
I'm willing
prepared to
do
specifically
that, but
do it? Well, go ahead, sir.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing, not from the right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a name. Give me a
White
name.
supremacists and
White
right
like me to condemn?
white supremacists and right
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem.
Anybody who's watching this objectively cannot say that Donald Trump refused to condemn white supremacy when you have him in response to that very question saying sure, and sure, I'm willing to do that. The fact that he pivoted to pointing out that the major problem in our country is left-wing violence is neither here nor there. That's also true, by the way, but the fact that he did that does not change the fact that he did condemn white supremacists prior to pivoting to the more important problem in our country. Also, Trump should have been way harsher on this question. Listen to it carefully and listen specifically to what Chris Wallace actually asked of Donald Trump and how ridiculous it was to ask this on a presidential debate stage, because there are lies in the question that he's asking Trump.
To say that they need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland.
They need to stand down and not add to the violence as we've seen in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we saw in Portland. That is not what happened in Kenosha and Portland, and we'll start with Kenosha first. Kyle Rittenhouse, who they're referencing, was somebody who was in Kenosha and acted in self-defense. The shooting involving Kyle Rittenhouse is on video. Wisconsin state law is something that Chris Wallace could easily look up and find out that he was acting fully within Wisconsin state law, even as we talked about in a previous video, under the circumstances where his misdemeanor gun possession charge, due to the fact that him being 17, is not covered by many of the exemptions that people argued for. Kyle Rittenhouse was acting fully within his rights to defend himself against Antifa attackers in Kenosha, Wisconsin. So that's already false. He's also not a white supremacist, absolutely ridiculous. And then Wallace has the nerve to bring up Portland, because Trump supporters, militia groups, and white supremacists are supposedly the ones committing the violence in Portland. We had 100 straight days of rioting in the city of Portland, but supposedly the problem is Trump supporters. And what he's referencing there is when Trump supporters decided to counter-protest the rioting of Antifa and the dereliction of duty of the mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, by driving through the city. Now, they did bring pepper spray in order to defend themselves from Antifa rioters, which makes sense because Antifa rioters are incredibly violent, and they've been violent for 100 straight days in the city of Portland, but they were practicing their First Amendment rights. But the specific violence that he's referencing even further there is the violence committed by a member of Antifa who stalked and shot a Trump supporter in the chest in cold blood without justification. We saw the photos of this man hiding in the parking lot, targeting his prey, just based on the fact that he had differing political opinions. We saw him give a Vice interview where he lied based on information that he got from Instagram and other media reports that the person that he shot in cold blood was supposedly armed with a knife and threatening people with that knife. Now, it turns out, sad day for Reinhold, that was not the case. Even though he was pictured holding a knife earlier in the day, at the time that he was stalked and murdered by this member of Antifa, he was not in fact armed with a knife. So this guy going and looking for an alibi and a backwards justification after the fact in media reports proved how much of a liar and how cold-blooded this murder was of a Trump supporter. So Chris Wallace is telling Donald Trump to apologize for his supporter for being violent by catching a bullet in the chest. I guess he violently took that bullet in the chest and then died, according to Chris Wallace and the Young Turks. By the way, the Young Turks backed the Antifa shooter. I did an entire video on them backing this guy, despite overwhelming evidence to prove that it was a premeditated act of murder based on political differences.
All right, so, Trump played the same trick that we've seen him play over and over again. Will you condemn white supremacists? Sure, but the leftists, they're the real bad guys. They're the bad guys, right?
Look how insanely comfortable Anna Kasparian is with lying directly to your face. She told you in the first 10 seconds of this video that in the debate, Donald Trump refused to condemn white supremacists. That's what she said in the beginning of this video. Let me play it for you in case you forgot the beginning of my video.
The Proud Boys are celebrating today after Donald Trump refused to condemn them and white supremacy during the first presidential debate.
Then she shows you the video that proves to you that Anna just started this video out by lying directly to your face. And then, instead of rectifying the fact that she got it wrong, she then quotes Trump saying, sure, I will condemn them, but then gets angry at him because he accurately pointed out that the violence that we've seen over the past few months has been overwhelmingly and undeniably coming from the left wing, specifically from Black Lives Matter and Antifa, the organization that was responsible for the assassination that I told you about earlier in this video.
And so it's clear that he refuses to condemn the right-wing gangs throughout this country that have carried out acts of violence, domestic terrorism over and over again for the past few decades.
Anna, what are you talking about? The right-wing gangs that carry out acts of violence and terror over and over in this country for decades. President Trump has not been president for decades. We're talking specifically about violence in recent history. If you want to go back decades, we can talk about bombings from the Weather Underground Group, which is a left-wing terror organization that has a lot of people, by the way, whose descendants are in the Democratic Party right now enacting policy, specifically the district attorney for San Francisco. But you don't want to talk about decades when it comes to left-wing violence. You want to talk about decades when it comes to Donald Trump, as if that's relevant or what we're talking about. And again, the audacity for you to talk about right-wing gangs, when, by the way, most right-wing terror attacks happen to be lone wolf terror attacks, but for you to say right-wing gangs when there are left-wing gangs that you are denying the existence of, committing violence over and over again, 600 plus times, according to that report that says 93% of the Black Lives Matter riots were peaceful. That's ridiculous, insane, and unbelievably hypocritical. But Anna is about to lie to your face and treat you like you're stupid even further by going into this next story.
I mean, it was a national story, as it should have been, when 2 LA Sheriff's Department cops were shot in an ambush. We still, by the way, don't know who the perpetrator is. That person is still at large. They haven't caught him. They don't know who he is. We don't even know what the political ideology of that individual is.
Now, this is true. Because we have not caught the person who shot those 2 LA sheriff's deputies, we don't know who they are, and we don't know what political ideology they are, and we don't even know if they were politically motivated. This could have easily been a gang shooting that happened to target those police officers. We just don't know right now because this person wasn't captured. However, we do know that the person who shot the officers was not white because we have surveillance video of that person where you can determine skin tone. And the reason that's relevant is because if this person were white, the Young Turks would try to make them out to be some kind of right-wing extremist. But the fact that they're not is why they're like, we don't know, we just don't know, and we can't even possibly imagine. Now, set aside the ideology of the shooter that we have not captured at this moment in time, because that will come out later when that person is eventually caught, and they could technically be a right-winger or a left-winger. That is still indeterminative at the moment right now that we're talking about this. But how did the left versus the right react to that shooting? Because that is far more relevant, because that's just one person committing one attack. But if you remember, the right wing was very sympathetic to the officers. They talked about how the officer that was wounded in the jaw, not caring about her own wounds, was trying to save her partner's life. Meanwhile, the left wing decided that it was okay to storm the emergency room, run into the hospital, and chant, "We hope these people die," while trying to interrupt their medical treatment. Not only on top of that, trying to interrupt their medical treatment, but also having the effect of interrupting other people who just happened to be at the hospital or needed to go to that emergency room's medical treatment. So the left wing was involved in this attack, whether or not they were involved in the initial attack or not, because they were the ones who were rooting for the death of those officers, and they were the ones who were trying to terrorize the hospital staff for daring to treat officers who were wounded like this. Now, that is undeniably a low and disgusting moment for the left wing, and something that Anna is not only going to not condemn, she isn't even going to bother to mention, because she doesn't care about left-wing acts of violence and left-wing acts of terrorism. That's who Anna is. But this is actually going to get a lot worse, because not only will she leave that out, not only will she leave out that if this person does have a political motivation where they would likely end up just based on the demographics of the shooter, but she's also going to try to roll this in to right-wing attacks on police, and by the end of the sentence, you will have come up to the impression that the person who targeted these LA sheriff's deputies, despite the fact that it is incredibly unlikely that they are right-wing, was in fact for sure a right-winger, and the fact that the left-wingers try to terrorize them, disturb their medical treatment to ensure that they'll die, don't even exist, and probably, you know, maybe they were right-wing too. I don't know. Anna doesn't know, and Anna doesn't care. All she cares about is defending her side and Orange Man bad.
But let me also note that in California, there's been a number of ambushes toward cops done by right-wing gangs, including the Boogaloo Boys. That happened earlier. It was either this year, I can't remember if it was late last year. No, it was this year.
As in Northern California ambush of cop, the Boogaloo Boys, the Boogaloo Boys. It was last year, but this year, definitely the Boogaloo Boys. The Boogeyman Boys. Now, I'm not denying the fact that the Boogeyman Boys might exist, because they probably do. They probably have like 18 members in their organization. But what I am denying is the fact that they are a major player in political violence in this country. Because almost every single time there's a fake hate crime attack, it's always somebody that's described in memorabilia that's somewhat reminiscent of these Boogaloo Boys, only to find out that that story turned out to be fake. And again, I did a video specifically about this, and specifically about the Young Turks buying into this earlier last month on this channel, if you want to check that out. If these people do exist, and I'm sure that they do, they're a relatively small organization. If they as an organization or an individual for that organization commit violence against a police officer or anybody in their goals to start a civil war, which is what I hear their ideology supposedly is all about.
I'm sorry, Tony. He was my friend. So was I. Pew, pew, pew. Up, kick, Captain America kick. Pew, pew. Up, shield. Pew, pew. Pew. Pew, pew, pew. Taking face off. There's a turtle.
Then obviously the person or persons responsible for those acts of violence or those killings or those targetings of police officers should be held accountable to the fullest extent of the law, and they should be called out as an organization and be 100% condemned for those violent actions. I don't care if you're left or right, that's horrible, and you should be held to account for that. But listen to what Anna does right after she follows around for the Boogaloo Boys, the Boogeyman Boys, and how she rolls in the LA Sheriff's deputies attack into a right-wing attack that happened after the fact that I'm not sure I ever heard of. I think the one before is the Oakland one, and I did hear about that one, so I think that one's legit. But the one after, definitely not.
Boogaloo Boys did an ambush in Northern California. After the ambush shooting that took place against Los Angeles Sheriff's Department deputies, there was another instance of these right-wing terrorists ambushing cops.
Yeah, did you catch that? After the ambush of the LA Sheriff's deputies, which Anna said earlier, we didn't know the ideology of the attacker. She left out the part about the left-wingers trying to storm the emergency room to make sure these officers died, even though they did nothing wrong. But she said earlier, we didn't know the ideology of the attacker. She said then there's another attack by these right-wing terrorists, implying that the LA Sheriff's deputies attack was the third in a row. Now, of course, Anna's not going to make a video, or anybody's going to make a video about the Young Turks supporter in Colorado who committed a shooting, somebody who was actually followed by the Young Turks and retweeted by the Young Turks and constantly retweeted the Young Turks and talked about how much he loved them. They're not going to mention that, even though that is much more indicative of a pattern of violence, as many attacks that have happened against law enforcement or against right-wingers have been conducted by the Young Turks. One of the most famous ones was the Baton Rouge shooting, but the Young Turks won't talk about that pattern of violence. They won't talk about the violence that they directly inspire as an organization. Instead, they're just going to paint all of that violence as right-wing because that's what they do, rather than taking accountability for their side or themselves specifically.
In California. So this is an ongoing issue. And Donald Trump, in that statement, essentially gave the Proud Boys a little hat tip, with that statement.
First of all, Trump did not tip his hat to the Proud Boys. You are just straight up lying about what he said. The Proud Boys were just memeing based on the stand back or stand by because Chris Wallace asked Trump to stand down and he was trying to find that phrase. In fact, John Iadarola is going to accidentally touch the truth in his statement while he's actively lying and somehow trying to outdo Anna Kasparian's level of lying.
He didn't even say the stand down. He said two other things, stand back and stand by, and then immediately said, but somebody needs to do something about this and it's a left-wing problem.
Any not even generous but remotely fair reading of what Trump responded to clearly would show that Chris Wallace said stand down. Trump was like, I know the phrase has stand in there. And he was like, stand back, stand by. Like, he wasn't finding the phrase that he wanted to say. But he was actively trying to say what Chris Wallace told him to. Which, by the way, he should not have been trying to say anyway. Trump does not control these groups. He should not be telling them to stand down, stand back, or stand by. He should be saying what he said post-Rittenhouse, that he wants law enforcement to handle all of this. He doesn't control any individual group, but he should say, I support law enforcement and law enforcement keeping the peace in our streets.
They're going to be even more self-assured that they have the go-ahead of the US government to do whatever they want, to brutalize people, not necessarily Proud Boys specifically, but other groups, the militia groups and stuff like that, to continue to ambush cops and everything. All the violence that we've seen for literally months. He has had any number of opportunities to stop it.
All of the violence we've seen for literally months.
All the violence that we've seen for literally months.
All of the violence we've seen for literally months.
All the violence that we've seen for literally months.
All of the violence we've seen for literally months. That's what John Iadarola just said. All of the violence we've seen from literally months has been right-wing militias or terror groups or whatever he's talking about. John, you're a liar. You're one of the most dishonest people to ever have a platform on the internet. The idea that you can say that all of the violence we've seen for literally months has been coming from the right wing, when the overwhelming majority, if you were to chart it out, it would be 99% of the violence is observably from the left wing, is absolutely crazy. Whereas it right-wingers rioting in Minneapolis after the death of George Floyd, no, that was overwhelmingly left-wing people chanting and spray painting Black Lives Matter everywhere. Is Portland the right-wing capital of the world? No, it's one of the most leftist cities in the entire world, so much so they are on the verge of electing an Antifa member. Trump has been trying to stop the violence. Democratic mayors and governors have been refusing the National Guard in their cities where left-wingers, overwhelmingly left-wingers, are rioting constantly. He has been trying to condemn the violence. In fact, in that very clip, when he was being asked a nonsensical question by Chris Wallace, because he has on multiple occasions denounced white supremacy, he was trying to talk about the real problem, which is radical left-wing violence, and specifically organizations like Antifa, an organization that Joe Biden denies the existence of and denied the existence of on that stage, which is in fact tacit approval. Repeating the propaganda from a terrorist organization is tacit approval of the actions of that terrorist organization. So John, shut up. Just stop talking. You cannot be trusted. You are a liar. You're one of the biggest liars at the Young Turks, which is saying something because Anna couldn't get through 10 seconds of this video without lying to her audience's face. So I just want to point out that the Young Turks graphic says that this is a Proud Boys gag member, not a gang member, a gag member, which I would think is a mistake, but I believe that somebody at the Young Turks did this intentionally because this entire segment is a gag, in that it's a joke. There's nothing factual about it, and the only appropriate response to the Young Turks calling themselves a news organization is to laugh at them, because if you take them seriously, you're gonna go absolutely crazy because they cannot tell you the truth. But moving on, let's talk about the next thing that Donald Trump has emboldened in this country.
Doing things like supporting Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old who gunned down 2 protesters in cold blood after crossing state lines with an illegal weapon. Trump has supported that person.
First of all, Trump did not support Rittenhouse. He was actually surprisingly measured on the question that he was asked about him. He said that they're looking into it, but it looked like it might be self-defense, which, by the way, it is on video and clearly and unambiguously self-defense, and Trump should have supported Rittenhouse. However, he did not. But listen to Anna just vomit up random left-wing words that they think are condemning of Kyle Rittenhouse, who clearly and obviously on video, unlike the Antifa shooter that the Young Turks made a video supporting, acted in self-defense.
Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old who gunned down 2 protesters in cold blood after crossing state lines with an illegal weapon.
What is the left-wing obsession with saying crossing state lines? Kyle Rittenhouse crossed state lines with the gun. He crossed the state lines. Those lines of the states Rittenhouse crossed, as if crossing state lines with a firearm is illegal. It's not. You can take a firearm, as long as you fill out the proper form, on an airplane in this country. There is no law specifically that forbids a person from taking a gun across state lines. They just make it up, and they say it over and over again to make you believe that Rittenhouse committed some crime by crossing state lines. By the way, if crossing state lines with a firearm were legal, then it would be a federal crime because it involves the jurisdiction of 2 states, and where exactly would you prosecute it? But that federal law does not exist. despite the fact that the left wing cannot shut the hell up about crossing state lines. You know, Kyle Rittenhouse also crossed some streets. He crossed a barrier. He went inside a building, went inside a car. He crossed the threshold. He probably promised something to somebody at some point where he crossed his heart, hoped to die, stuck a needle in his eye. Crossing, crisscross, cross the street, diagonal crossing. He probably did some jump roping where he crossed his legs while he was jump roping. All of it is stupid and not illegal, but it does involve the word cross, if that's something that you think is somehow illegal. Number 2, Rittenhouse worked in Kenosha, which was 15 minutes away from his home, and he received the gun that he was out patrolling with while he was in Kenosha. So he didn't grab a gun illegally in Illinois and bring it across state lines to kill anybody. He was already working in Kenosha, and somebody said, hey, do you want to come out and protect these businesses? And gave him a gun. On top of that, while Rittenhouse was charged with the misdemeanor gun possession, even if he were to be convicted with that misdemeanor gun possession, he could still claim self-defense because his actions totally fall within the law of if you're committing a crime at the time that you commit self-defense. He fled, which you don't have to do normally when that gun is legal. On top of that, there is a very strong case that there is an exemption in Wisconsin law for long guns, which is what Rittenhouse was in fact carrying. So Rittenhouse might not have been in the possession of an illegal gun, as the blanket ban on possessing a gun is for people under 16 in Wisconsin, and Rittenhouse was 17 and was holding a long gun, two things which might very well meet the exemption to the underage possession statute in the state of Wisconsin. So that part might not even be true as well. But hey, maybe I got this all wrong. Maybe Anna Kasparian isn't actually trying to cover the news or report the news. Maybe she's just going for a record for how many times you could lie in a single video, because that's the only logical explanation for how wrong this person could be months later when these details have been out there publicly over such a long period of time. What is wrong with you, Anna? What is wrong?
Like, yeah, he's a white supremacist, and much more importantly, he wants white supremacists to support him to go out and do whatever they want, brutalize people, all of that, get away with murder. He doesn't care, he just doesn't care. And I know that we don't, but I'm sick of people pretending that we're really concerned, and we should find out exactly where he stands on this. We know, and we have known for years. We knew before 2016.
Now this video ends with John Iadarola, the absolute unbearable liar, crying about how come 100% of the people don't believe the ridiculous lies that it seems like his audience just accepts with their brain turned off. And the reason why 100% of the population aren't like the Young Turks audience is because they wouldn't even be able to drive to work, because that's how stupid you have to be a member of the Young Turks audience. Stupid enough that you can't operate a vehicle. Stupid enough that you can't even ride a bike with training wheels. So John, save your faux tears, save your, oh, I'm so indignant, for somebody else. Try telling the truth about one thing, and then maybe we can have a conversation about how you're still lying about 99% of the other things. Now, normally I say those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, but honestly, I just want to ask, is this not obvious to you guys? Is this not obvious to everybody who's watching this? The video contradicts itself multiple times in the video, and yet it still has a 9-to-1 like to dislike ratio. So 9 more people to every one person who said this is nonsense said, no, this is good stuff. I like it. I support it. Even though it's internally contradictory, I'm gonna hit that like button. Like, I couldn't imagine making a video that has this level of errors and not be completely underwater in my likes to dislikes. But you know what? Different audience. I can't even explain it. Maybe you can explain it in the comments of this video, but I'm done. Like, there's nothing to add here. You know the drill. Social media, likes, shares, blah, blah, blah. Get me to 100K. Come on, it's almost Christmas time. Get me that Christmas present. Till next time.